Okay, good evening, everyone. Let's try this one more time. It's Sunday, October the 27th, 2024. It's the Fakeologist show. It's Sunday, 8:05 p.m., and we were just tuning in with IPS because we were watching this guy, the greatest show on earth.
Kimberly and Michael, we have great people. We have Baron Homies watching. That Baron is watching. He's the
All
king
right,
of the
and
internet.
we're doing a joint
Who's that
broadcast
king
with
of the
IPS,
internet?
IPS.monster, Infinite Plane Society. And I'm a subscriber or patron of IPS, and
My sister
most of you
Elizabeth
guys should
is
be
here.
too if
She's
you're not
great.
already. And we're just talking
I don't
about
know where
media
she is, but
fakery.
she's
There's no other
here,
channel,
and we love her.
even probably more than the Fakeologist channel that
And
talks
Speaker
about
Mike
media
Johnson
fakery, and
is
that's
here. He's
Tim
doing a
Osmond
great
of
job.
IPS. How you doing, Tim?
It's not
Yeah,
easy
thank you
when
for
you
having me back on, and I'm glad we could touch base before the election
Yeah,
because it's
because
going to be a big week.
it'll be a very big week. It is very exciting. It is, like I said, the biggest show on earth, and there's just so much to unpack. Every eye in the world is probably watching this show right now. It's bigger than Who Shot JR in Dallas back in, I think, the 80s. So this is big. So welcome to this joint broadcast where we have Tim Osmond and all his YouTube channels and his X channel, my X channel, my D Live. And I don't think many channels link up through this facility like we do.
I don't think so either. And I think now's a great time to link up with anybody who is operating at the level we are in terms of we're total skeptics with regard to media. Because I'm looking at all the celebrity worship, the idolatry, the people who are so deep in their ideology, they essentially worship their leaders. And I think we're the sanest people on the plane right now. So it's great to be here with you and your chat. And of course, they're all merged here. So I think we'll have a good turnout tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. If they're not watching this, I have to admit I've sort of descended into Normieville for the last couple of days just to see what everyone's talking about in the wide world. Besides listening to your show, I do go into I have been in YouTube world lately where it's serving me many man on the street interviewers who are walking around Trump or Kamala. That seems to be the question du jour, and I sort of it's not that I believe in elections, but it is a big show, and it's almost like if you don't understand what these guys are talking about, you'll have a hard time communicating with the average normie out there. But I do like all the little drops and the little programs and the Joe Rogan experience, which is allegedly is the biggest podcast in the world, and trying to detect messages. And I think you do that as well.
Yeah, I made a point yesterday at AutoHoaxCon 2 that we have to be informed about the misinformation, that if you tune out, you're at a disadvantage when there's a big psyop that motivates the masses. So we actually have to know more about the stuff we don't believe in than the people who just passively accept it all as real. And this election is obviously a major plot twist. And I keep up with stuff mainly through Twitter. That's how I monitor the thoughts of Normieville. And a surprising number of people are questioning the ear wound. However, they assume the fireman died, which kind of holds them back. But yeah, there's no way you cannot pay attention to this. I watched his entire conversation with Joe Rogan because we need to know what the masses are being programmed with. In fact, last night, the number one show on Amazon, number one movie was called Canary Black. So I watch it because it's number one,
Okay.
knowing that it's going to have predictive programming. And it was about a doomsday computer virus that can shut everything down. And the bad guy was Russian and he looked just like Putin. So that's the kind of messaging that's going out this exact minute.
Canary Black. Yeah, that's one thing you do well is you keep in touch with the mainstream Netflixes and the Amazons, and you're looking for messages to tell you what's going to happen next in the so-called real news entertainment complex.
Yeah, I do this to make the point that you can't separate it. And that fact that this is the number one movie right now means that this is being projected onto the collective psyche. It's hitting a lot of minds. And so I'm watching it with that in mind, and I'm like, obviously, I'm like, this guy's Putin. He sounds like
Mm.
Putin, represents Russia. And then the female protagonist could be maybe tied into Harris, but whatever it is, the movie is about It's about a doomsday computer virus that blacks everything out. So canary black. So I don't think you can separate the movies from the news because they're sending concerted messages.
Hmm. And the other thing we might talk about, if you want, is the whole chemtrail thing. I don't know if it's getting bigger, accelerating, but your view is I've aligned myself with your view on so-called chemtrails or vapor trails or contrails. I really don't really see the other side's point of view as much as it's just sort of such a mainstream conspiracy. That's another reason I'm suspicious of it. So we can talk about that if you want as well.
Yeah, I think we could because it's being pushed out there quite heavily by
Mhm.
big anonymous accounts. And these are all bot-like accounts. They're just spamming for attention, but there's a reason why it's going out there. I think it's a net. And it's a net to capture any wandering minds and drag them into Trutherville, drag them into this area where they're going to be surrounded by guardrails and controlled opposition narratives. So I think it needs to be called out. People need to know why they should reject it, not simply because we don't believe. And I have reasons that make it rejectable, and those who don't reject it need to confront the reasons I present. So I'm 100% about debunking misconceptions, especially if they Trojan horse their ideas in with logical fallacies. These are vulnerabilities that you should want to have exposed.
And it seems like more than half of Trutherville, as you call it, is thinks that they're being sprayed from the sky. At least more, I would say 60%, 70%. So you've taken a minority position.
Yes, I think it's notable here that the hurricane just happened, and the right is claiming man did it, but government caused it because geoengineering and chemtrails. And the left is saying, no, man did it, but it was because of capitalism. We can blame the private sector. So both sides are kicking this football back and forth. They're basically fighting over this narrative, but they both agree it happened. They accept the premise that man is altering climate and weather. And I think that's the goal. They got both sides in total agreement that there's a problem that
Mhm.
needs to be solved. And I reject that there's even a problem. And I find that it's the sky phobia is no different than climate change hysteria. It's the same exact mentality, but one is on the left, one is on the right side of the political horseshoe.
And I followed that story in Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina a little bit, and there's quite a few truthers, including True Stream Media, who I do sponsor as well in a small way every month, like I do you. And the answer could be as simple as bad dam management, as in DAM management, where they do have a series of dams in the area that were overflowing, and maybe some of the infrastructure possibly was made to let go. Although I have read today that none of the dams broke, but they did overflow. So uh, there isn't much emphasis on that possibility, that it's just lots of rain and the dam management couldn't handle it, and most of the places are in river valleys.
You know, when it comes to things like this and then the fires in California, I wonder if it's what Lynn would call lie hop. Like, could there be some element of intentional negligence, let it happen on purpose, in other words? So there
Yeah.
could be some element here when it comes to these bigger events where you couldn't possibly fake a hurricane, but
Mhm.
could you somehow allow it to be worse than it should have been and then blame? Obviously, that's a possibility. I tend to think it's more media augmentation than
Mhm.
any real catastrophic damage, but it's issue to issue. We have to look at these things.
And there are other reasons, perhaps, why the people that were trying to help we're told not to interfere by FEMA, because maybe there's simple explanations that FEMA has contracts with big vendors, and if you're bringing water, you're affecting their business model. So there's always the easier, more, I would say, the No Agenda show summarized it pretty well, that why you don't have to build a big conspiracy when there are just some financial reasons why certain things are done in certain less efficient ways, but government ways.
Disaster capitalism. And I think that might be a factor here. That there's obviously some competition over who gets the contracts to clean things,
Yeah.
and there's a huge narrative also, though, a psyop narrative in making it seem like the government doesn't want to do it. because they're lazy and they're punishing Trump voters. And the MAGAs are trying to save the day by going against the FEMA. So I think the anti-government narrative is very strong right now, and it's playing into this entire thing. So I tend to think that the stuff against FEMA was mostly narrative. There might be some more rational explanations. And there were so many people passing on false information, claiming more deaths, claiming, oh, this town smells like corpses. And then other people would go investigate and find it wasn't the case. So we have to recognize that there's a lot of incentive for people to exaggerate, and a lot of it's just for clicks. How many Twitter people were taking clips from Instagram or TikTok, posting it on their account, and then just repeating it without having vetted it? And it got out of hand. I watched one person claiming to be a nurse who claimed to know people and that she was going to set up a GoFundMe so she could wire money to those fire departments. And I'm thinking, this has got to be some kind of a really easy to do scam, but the whole thing is just so scammy. Like the scamdemic, they're scamming on all of these big issues.
All right. Well, why don't we just go back to the greatest show on earth, the Trump show, the Joe Rogan Experience show. What were some of the things you got out of that 3-hour interview? I listened to the whole thing yesterday myself. No great revelations on JFK, no great revelations on Area 51. It was just a whole, and no a glossing over of the earshot where he really didn't, really de-emphasized and really didn't say it was a big deal and wouldn't show any evidence of a scar. He just sort of brushed his hand. So what's your take on the whole Trump show, and what's your take on since we probably won't convene until after November 5th, what's your take on any clues as to what the script will be, since it's already probably predetermined?
Right, right. Now the ear thing has a lot of connections predictive programming wise. The Cape Crusader Batman season finale just came out. Rupert Thorne, a Trump-esque character, gets the ear thing. We've mentioned all these various instances of how, like, Tony Soprano, ear wound. So the ear wound thing was meant to happen, and I don't think that it's separate. I don't think it's the end of it. I think there's a separate type of thing that's supposed to happen. There's a lot of predictive programming for it. And so based solely on what we've been conditioned for, like the movie Civil War in particular, Trump is in the White House, but there's a civil war and they take him out.
Mhm.
And a black female soldier is set up to do this. This has a mirror in Fallout where Betty
Okay.
Pearson, and in this situation, there's this suggestion of a stolen election. Same thing. So everything suggests very contentious. But as far as basing a winner on this, um, I I'm hesitant to say that I'm totally confident it's Trump because every bit of Netflix programming seems to indicate Kamala.
Wow.
But as far as the movie Megalopolis we recently talked about, it has this more dominant narrative of it's beyond just an ear wound; it's a head wound, and it's this bigger drama that unfolds. Like it incites a 9/11, and the ear wound barely sent any ripples. So I don't think that that could be it. I don't know when this foreshadowed event is scheduled to occur, but I'm just looking at this as if we base it off of Civil War, it looks like Trump gets in and it's highly contested. If we look at, I think it was on Amazon DMZ, it's the same thing, but the country's split in two. So everything points to some massive schism and disputes. So whoever wins, the other side's going to obviously call it a loss. But anyway, I'm not basing this on political analysis or polls, but based solely on the programming.
Mhm.
And I'm leaning towards uh, Trump wins, and the left is totally not buying it, and there's some kind of contention over it. But that's kind of what, again, basing it solely on what has been foreshadowed.
Yeah, and Trump has been saying also on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I just before you came on while I was watching the speech, he's also indicating that being president is a very dangerous job. He mentioned bull riders, he mentioned NASCAR drivers have a certain percentage death percentage, and he's saying being president is way higher. He didn't really know that, I guess, until the headshot or the staged headshot. I guess I should couch it with that. And of course, he said there were a couple, or they said, or someone said there's a couple other attempts. So now he's actively talking about this idea that it's a very dangerous job, and you could easily get assassinated. So is he telling us? Is he projecting? Is he conditioning us? What's your take on that? Because he's revved that up.
That's right. They were talking about how statistically it's very dangerous to be a president. And
Mhm.
then at his rally last night, I saw this video where he's standing up in his black trench coat, black hat, and they're playing the Undertaker's theme song. And then he chokes up for a minute, saying that this is going to be the last rally. He's never going to campaign again. So there seemed to be some kind of a swan song feel to it.
Wow. Where was that? Sorry? That
I
was
think
yesterday?
it was yesterday. Yes, yes. It's on my Twitter feed. It's on IPS Think Tank. You'll find it on my feed. I retweeted one of these videos of him standing there against a black backdrop, and they're playing The Undertaker, which just seems, again, kind of dramatic, very ominous.
Okay, I'm gonna find it.
But again, the reason why I think that he would likely win and it would be contested is that the larger narrative has been this setup for some kind of event that incites something even larger. And there's been so much of a buildup towards him being martyred, the Christification. You know, okay, so the New York Post endorsed him and they said Back to the Future. So Back to the Future has Donald Trump in it as Biff Tannen. And so
Mhm.
that also suggests that he wins, but there's chaos as a result. In other words, he enters his Biff Tannen phase. Okay, you're almost there.
Okay. Well, you've really got quite a detailed Twitter feed here. One of the problems with Twitter is the people you follow rarely get put in your timeline. You have to literally go to everyone's the page that you're following and try and find stuff. So I don't really see any of this even though I follow you.
Right.
It's frustrating, very frustrating. I used to be able to grab the RSS feed of every Twitter, but they cut that off from the source I was using, so now I have to and you forget who you follow on Twitter, at least I do.
That was nice when they used to have that. Yeah, they've definitely destroyed Twitter in a lot of ways. There it is. That's
Okay,
the
here it
video.
is.
And
Cool.
so for anybody who wants to follow me, it's IPS Think Tank.
So you're saying that they got the this is you got the black trench coat, the black hat. Okay. Interesting.
And the Undertaker theme song. So
Oh, is that
yes,
what that is? I wouldn't even have known that song. Okay.
yeah, someone in the comments posted this, and so I put a lot of the video content that we might want to listen to. I put it all on my timeline, and if you click, yeah, definitely, it's definitely the Undertaker.
Okay. And that's from WWE? Is that what that's from?
Yes, yes, the Undertaker, and in fact, the Undertaker recently endorsed Trump. They were hanging out or something.
5 years from now.
Okay, let me try and play this one again. This one is giving me a hard time. Okay, The Undertaker, the wrestler, endorsed Trump.
Yeah, and then he has Hulk Hogan out there flexing. So yeah, okay, the new. Here you go.
I don't know. There's a lot of. Okay, that's pretty okay.
It's a
Gotcha.
dirge. I mean, it's a dirge. It's the music he plays when he holds the urn and he goes down the aisle. And so that's kind of, I'm saying it's very ominous. So the New York Post put him on the cover and they said Back to the Future. So that's a Biff Tannen reference, Donald Trump reference, of course, in his later stage where he's a tyrant. So that could be a good bit of foreshadowing. And the New York Post called him Braveheart when he went to Butler 84
Mhm.
days after the shooting. They called him Braveheart. And if you remember, at Butler, when he was shot, he did the Braveheart pose, just like the movie. The flag was behind him that matched the alignment of the flag on his face for his avatar on Truth Social. So you have the Braveheart alignment, the avatar perfectly insinuated there. And then on the cover of the New York Post, they called him Braveheart on that day. So again, none of this is coincidental.
Wow, you really get deep on this. This is way more than I can even imagine. So you really make a lot of links.
Oh yeah, and I even called this out that the right wing would jump on to the 6:11 p.m. shooting time and
Mhm.
attach it to the biblical reference 6:11 Ephesians, armor of God. And just yesterday, Jack Posobiec, top tier right wing influencer, was out there telling people that the fact it happened at 6:11 mean that God intervened. See, there it is, Back to the Future.
Wow, and WAPO the Democrat Washington Post didn't endorse anybody. That was supposed to be a big deal.
Yep, the Post endorses Donald Trump Back to the Future, and that is a very blatant predictive programming tie-in to Trump in his incarnation as like this evil dictator type, and he looks like a combination of Trump and Elvis as Biff Tannen. But it's Biff Tannen who I think dies, and I would even add to it the name Biff is likely a tie-in to this Masonic martyr, Biff, Hiram Abiff. So I call him, Hiram Abiff Tannen because we're waiting for this this end of this build up, this big narrative build up towards the next JFK like event.
I'm just reading. Yeah, you do a lot. Is this your main source of where you post now, or is it still on the Minds account?
Everything that I find noteworthy, I put on my Minds account. So if there's a tweet, I'll screen cap the tweet and post a link. And I try to maintain this. I do maintain it because I want to show my receipts. And November 5th, by the way, should be interesting considering QAnon. Anon comes from the anonymous movement. The anonymous movement's face is Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes is tied to the November 5th gunpowder plot. The movie V for Vendetta predicted 2020, and it's by Ellen Moore, one of his stories. Great deal of clarity there. It's 2020, lockdowns, viruses, dictatorship. But the fact is, you have the Anons, who are, of course, pre-Q, but now you have QAnon. So I'm thinking QAnon, if anything is to happen, would be perfect to be scapegoated if something were to go down on 11/5. And in the Batman movie, you have this flood on November the 5th on the election that puts Gotham underwater on 11/6. Well, the Penguin series has reiterated that same November the 5th flood. So I'm seeing the Batman universe predictive programming, V for Vendetta, and all of it would correlate because in the Batman movie, it's the Riddler, an anonymous internet provocateur that triggers the dams breaking and flooding the polls. So I'm looking at November 5th, the possibility of some disruption as kind of in the script here.
Well, yeah, we talked about that or did you talk about as well that there are drills scheduled for the day? Well, it was for the 5th, 6th, and 7th Homeland Security cyber drills, but then they
Yes.
took off the 5th one. They took off November 5th, and just now it's just the 6th and the 7th. Did you know that?
No. And see, that's
Okay.
interesting. That's interesting they would do that because do you remember Cyber Polygon was canceled and then they did it for real? So I'm thinking this might tie into Canary Black, which is again, top movie right now, promoting the idea of a digital nuke is what they called it.
I'm trying to find it here. We did talk about it with Frank the Salt guy. Okay, here it is here. Homeland Security, infrastructure, cyber. Now, so I captured this from archive.today, and they changed this. So you can see here it was set for November 6th and 7th with a large-scale cybersecurity exercise on November 5th. So they took this part off.
Okay, that is fascinating because again, the thing that really stood out about Cyber Polygon was we're waiting for this event that's going to happen in the summer, this tabletop exercise. Then it gets canceled, and on that day, you have these major disruptions in Canada. And I thought all they had to have done is just said, "Hey, look, we're just going to drill this thing, but we're going to say it's real and test our system." So the fact that they pulled that date to me stands out as a red flag.
Yeah, I was affected by that day in Canada. We just had one of our largest cell carriers. Just the network went down. So for I would say most of the day. So that was just a real frustrating day for anyone with a cell phone from this major carrier in Canada. And they can literally just flip the switch on and off, and they just blame it on whatever. They never have to give an explanation. So
Oh, let me add one thing. At that event where Trump is listening to the Undertaker's theme song, dressed in black, he talked about how we've been doing this for 9 years, and in 11 days, it's coming to an end. In other words, campaigning and
yes,
so he threw out a 9/11 pretty clear. And Back to the Future 9/11 predictive programming. You can't separate Trump from it. This was talked about in depth yesterday at the Auto Hoax Con. But yes, he specifically said 9 years, 11 days.
So is this the rally that he showed up at after the Rogan show? Because it says here it was 3 hours late. Was this in Michigan?
I think this is the one where people stood outside for 3 hours. I don't know if this was after Rogan
Yeah.
or the day after, but yes. And it was noted by the news media that people were out there for 3 hours freezing.
Yeah, I think it was Detroit or somewhere in Michigan. Yeah. Okay. So that's the one with the Undertaker. And yeah, I think I read that he blamed it on being on Rogan for whatever amount of time, I guess the same day. One thing for a guy that's almost 80 to keep up the schedule, it is, even if you like us think all of this is staged and hoaxed and scripted, it is a pretty grueling schedule, even though you have a private plane. Do you think there's more than one Trump? Because I don't think so, just because of the way his facial mannerisms is, the way he speaks. I don't know, but if that would be easy to have a doppelganger for. But I think there can be stand-ins, but not when he's speaking. I don't know. What's your take on that? Do you think you have multiple instances of Trump?
He's likely the hardest working man in show business. I think that he's just
Yeah.
hardworking. Before he came into office, I started seeing him in the news, and so I read a couple of his books, and I got the idea from his books that he sleeps 4 hours a night, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke,
Yeah.
and I think that he's probably managing this just fine. I don't think he's and something else he pointed out in the Joe Rogan debate, he said that essentially that Biden kind of gives a bad name to people that age, that they're all breaking down, and he suggested that no, Biden is abnormal, that he had brain surgery or something, but
Yes.
that you wouldn't expect somebody at 78 to be cognitively impaired and slowing down necessarily, but that's sort of an indirect attack by the other campaign against his own cognitive health. But yeah, he did address this.
Okay. All right. So you don't think there's more than one?
I think
Okay.
he's doing I think he could handle. I think one actor could handle it, and this is the role of a lifetime, and he's catered to, obviously. But
Yes.
as far as there being doubles, though, they would have to be body doubles. That's standard for all. I'm sure that's standard for all
Yeah, for
presidents.
big leaders, for any big leader. Yeah, for sure. They have stand-ins, stunt doubles, that kind of thing. People that show up in the wrong place or at the wrong side of the building where the real guy might be coming in the other way, that kind of thing. That's all standard operating procedure, I would say.
There are many who believe he's a twin, red tie, blue tie, and you
Mhm.
can find it where it's like it does seem like two different people. He's polished, speaking really quick, and there's other times he's like you see him golfing. I'm like, is that the same guy? But a lot of it could be camera angles and lighting. So I'm not too certain about this, but the idea of there being twins, that's been floating around for a long time. And in the predictive programming, there's a ton of stuff connecting Trump to this idea of him being a twin, even the Twin Tower stuff. So I can't rule out that there are twins, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've come across this stuff as well. It's within the realm of fakeability, but I
Yeah.
don't know the meaning of it.
Now we got lots of people watching tonight. If anyone wants to call in, we'll take your calls. The phone numbers are at the bottom of the screen: 810-666-1984, 902-400, 1984. Shortfake.com/restream if you want to come into the studio here. All different ways to communicate if you want to, or if you want to leave a comment, we can try and get through all the comments here. This is a pretty large number. IPS always brings a large audience over here, and we're really appreciative of that. And we're all big fans here at Fakeologist of IPS. Some of us even agree with you on the chemtrail thing, but not everyone does. It seems to be one of the most divisive issues. I don't really even call it media fakery in any way. It's just sort of a truther, um, just a truther talking point that really creates a big divide, like many others.
Yeah, my take on it is this: if you can convince me of chemtrails without resorting to any logical fallacies, then we can talk. And I think this is a great opportunity to expose and remove vulnerabilities. I would want to know if I was falling for loaded questions. And I think everybody who accepts the question of what are they spraying and tries to ask themselves, what are they spraying? They should know that that's a loaded question that assumes that it's a spray and not just the reaction of hot air at a certain altitude. But I think people should want to be proven wrong. I want to be proven wrong. If the expedition to Antarctica shows a 24-hour sun, I'm not going to ignore that information. I have to think about, well, what does this actually mean? And I see a lot of people, especially with this, the ones who are really attached to the flat Earth topic, not interested in testing their own model. They don't want to be proven wrong.
8 seconds.
All right, we got a caller in. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
My name's John the Beggar. I'm from the South Shore of the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Regular caller John. Say hi to Tim.
Hi, Tim. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you for calling.
I have always thought there were multiple Trumps, even from the past. There's a commercial Kamala has, or Kamala, whatever you want to call her, and it shows the early Donald Trump and a later one, and the nose is substantially different. And you don't get major nose jobs like that late in life. And he's two different characters, and I know the blue tie, red tie that was last time and the time before. I have no doubt about there's several people playing him.
Okay.
Absolutely no doubt about that.
Well,
and as far as chemtrails,
who's in New York tonight, by the way?
I didn't see.
Okay.
I didn't see anything. But as far as chemical trails, the sky was just fudged with like it was like taking a piece of chalk the long way, not the pointed way, on a board, a chalkboard in school, and drawing and smearing it out. That's not normal clouds. And earlier in the day, there was a crisscross of trails all over the sky.
Okay.
They're most definitely spraying things.
Let me address that and then the nose thing, the Trump nose thing, because that's a good point. The reason why you have that appearance of like the chalk sideways run across the board is it's just the warm air rising hitting the stratosphere, and it creates these cirrus clouds as a layer, and it's a layer that seems to blanket the whole sky. But the conditions that would create that layer also are conducive to contrails. So you see the crisscrossing planes on their flight paths, they're not causing the cirrus cloud cover. That was going to happen anyway as the day warmed up. So it's just faulty causality. They're not causing it. They're just
saw that when I was a kid.
Were you looking for it though?
Yeah, I would look up in the sky, played the outfield for years.
Okay.
I never saw skies like that at all. And the sun has changed too. It's a white light. It was a yellow light when I was a kid.
Are you near an airport, by the way?
I'm not too far from one.
Okay.
Okay, well, the term cirrus cloud was coined in 1807, and I think the term derives from the same word as like curl. And so these things have this cloud cover, and we get it depending on your climate and where you are, but it's something that has been observed since 1807. So you say it wasn't there when I was a kid. Well, it had to have been. And the idea that this is a novel phenomenon is a misconception. And then the sun is white. It emits all colors. And it's due to the scattering of the atmosphere that we.
It was yellow when I was a kid.
It was yellow in the morning.
I looked up that it was yellow. It is white now.
It was yellow at sunset. It was yellow at sunrise. But the sun has always been white because of what it is.
This morning it was pretty red for me. And
it's red.
And the sky and the sky was pink this morning as well.
We never had that many red skies in the morning or at night when I was a kid.
Okay,
it was unusual.
Okay.
I would posit this, that because of the way we associate memories together, that when you were a kid, most of your memories of the sun consisted of cartoons, drawing pictures with a yellow crayon. And so you have all these representations in your mind of the sun, and it's yellow. The sky is blue.
No, I have memories of playing the outfield.
You never saw a yellow sun. You saw a white sun. That's just it's not physically possible.
Flazik says the sun used to have a smiley face on it.
No, I never saw a smiley face.
Well, I guess that's when you were drawing. Okay. Well, so John, we can mark you down as a believer in chemtrails, and what is the purpose of them, do you think?
They're geoengineering the weather.
To do what, though?
Doing disaster capitalism with it.
Okay.
And they're going to try to bring on this one world government because we're all polluting the place, and yet all the pollution, or most of it, is being done by them.
Okay, good. You live on the same weather line as I do. I'm in Toronto. You're down to the west of me, so we get the same weather. And I live by the Toronto airport. There's no planes taking off spraying that I can see. Although the exhaust does smell to high heaven, and I literally the area around the airport is covered in just all the exhaust particulate, and it's definitely it combines with all the automotive exhaust around the airport. It's a huge 25-lane highway by the Toronto airport. So there's that. But the weather is extremely active, but most of it comes from the very cold north wind that blows over Lake Huron, which I think you're adjacent to as well. So
No, I'm a little to the south and west of Lake Huron.
Okay, but we get the northwest wind that brings the moisture from Lake Huron 75% of the time. And then the other time when the wind goes just for the west, Buffalo gets buried by the open Lake Erie, which I think you're on one end of as well. So
yes, I'm on the other end.
So we're on the Great Lakes system, which has enough moisture. Why would they need to create more moisture when we have more fresh water than anywhere else on the entire planet?
Well, they're spraying to do other effects.
Wait, let me add something here before you go on. One, you're saying they're spraying. You don't have any evidence that it's a spray, that it would necessarily, like a spray is like a fluid or something inside of the plane that is squirting out.
I have evidence from a mechanic who is a friend of mine, a plane mechanic at Metro Airport in Detroit. He's retired now. And I asked him about this, and he wouldn't speak to me. He said, I'm going to retire in about 8 months. And he said, after I'm retired for about half a year, he said, I'll tell you what I know. And he retired. And about 2 months after he retired, he said, I'm going to tell you what I know. And he said he was working on a plane, and he saw a tank.
Okay, this is hearsay, but go on.
No, it's not hearsay. It's testimony from an actual mechanic. And he said he called the government like he's trained to do. And if he sees anything on a plane, they came out, looked at it, and told him everything's okay. If you see this ever again, don't bother calling us. It's okay. And he would see these strange tanks hooked up in planes on strange areas, in strange parts, periodically. So I know for a fact they're spraying.
Okay, well, let me add one thing. One thing, you know this for a fact, but you're not wearing a mask. Your kids aren't on masks. You don't mask your dog when you take it for a walk. Why aren't you concerned enough about the supposed chemtrail to wear a mask? Or are you assuming it's only...
A mask doesn't do anything. Those masks don't do anything but cut down on the amount of oxygen you receive.
Okay, let me add one more thing before we move on. Because one more thing here. There's this thing called the Appleman chart from the 1950s. And it is a tool used by the Air Force to predict conditions that would give away their planes. In other words, hey, look, today we're going to have cirrus clouds. So if we fly a plane up here, it's going to leave a trail. So if you can predict cirrus clouds, you can predict contrails. Contrails are predictable. Chemtrails are not. So you can't even submit to us as evidence that there's a chemtrail operation if you can't debunk contrails first. And contrails are a byproduct of the climate and the interaction with the altitude, the high altitude rarefied air with hot jet exhaust. It's easy to explain, and it's repeatable and predictable. Your theory is not predictable, and it's reliant on, trust me, bro.
No.
I talked to somebody who knows somebody.
No, it's relied on firsthand information and from my actual eyewitness of a lifetime.
Okay, John, we're going to move on now. Thanks for calling. I'm going to put a link to the Appleman chart in the show notes, but I don't want to spend all day going back and forth on just chemtrails because we got some important Trump stuff to talk about too.
Okay, well, he did say the nose was different, did he not?
Okay.
Yeah, let me run this by you. Okay, so the nose thing is interesting because you said people don't generally get these later in life. And President Biden's nose is substantially smaller than Vice President Biden's nose. Same with the skull. And then I'm thinking, so what do you think about that?
Are we talking about Biden or Trump?
Well, he talked about Trump's nose, and I'm saying that Biden's nose is significantly smaller than when he was...
a different person. He's definitely a different person. I'm not sure if he's even the same person that ran for president years ago back in the 80s. I'm not sure the vice president, Biden, we knew was the same guy. And I know the guy in there now is not the same as Vice President Biden for sure.
Okay.
But if you go to the nose and you look at early pictures of Donald Trump, his nose is different. It's an entirely different human being playing him now.
Okay. I'm not convinced on one way or the other, but mostly not. And I haven't really found too many links. So if you've got any links, email them to me or put them in the show notes.
Yeah, because
We can look at them because I'm not convinced.
yeah, I'm not either for this reason. I could see Biden being replaced because it's not a hard character to play, but Trump has a very distinct personality and his mannerisms are so idiosyncratic. I
And he
don't
does a
know.
lot of talking.
Yeah, yeah. There's
A
like
lot of talking, a lot of kissy faces with the mouth and all that. So
Well, I think he's a talented actor, and he always was, no matter who was playing him. And I'm sure they can get good, talented actors anytime they want to.
okay, well, I agree that a lot of he's the best actor that ever played president. That's for sure. So, John, thanks for calling in, man.
Okay, good night, guys.
Take care, John the Beggar from the South Shore of the St. Lawrence Seaway. Anyone else can call in as well and ask questions. We don't mind being challenged a little bit here and there. But what do you want to go on to next, Tim?
Well, I would just say if you look up the Appleman chart and faulty causality, you can reverse engineer how you're tricking yourself into thinking the planes are causing the cloud cover. It's an easy trick. It's a magic trick. It's basically putting you're misreading what you're actually observing, and that's why it's so compelling for them. The people who believe in chemtrails are making observations. The problem is they're processing the information wrong. So it's just a logical fallacy, something to look into.
Why does this topic take so much energy out of people? What is so fascinating about it? I mean, there's so much about media fakery and the stuff I like to talk about. Why does this just consume people to such a degree?
I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's because the chemtrail thing is the only conspiracy theory that gives truthers evidence of their oppression. Like we're being oppressed right now. Look, you can see it with your eyes. No other conspiracy theory has that. So I think it's just the theatrics of it that you're sitting there as a silent witness to your doom and destruction, and nobody believes you. So it makes you feel alienated and paranoid. So I think it's an incredible psyop. That's what it's a psyop. They're alarmists. They're scared.
And climate change really has no visual evidence, so there's not really much to go on with that one. You just have to take the data sets that they give you saying that the polar bears are disappearing or increasing and the ice shelf is falling out. You can't see any of that stuff.
Exactly, exactly. Climate change isn't so visible.
No.
Now, what's interesting though is in the last couple of years, NASA scientists, NOAA, and climate scientists have pivoted to say contrails are
Mhm.
causing climate change. So now chemtrail believers and climate change believers are arguing the same thing.
They're
They're on
starting to line up. Yeah, they're lining up.
so John the Beggar is essentially espousing the same views as Greta, same alarmism. And I'm saying this is evidence of the Hegelian dialectic. And if you took a side, pro or anti, you're being played. And it's leading towards the gray, the synthesis, where both sides agree man's doing some bad stuff, and we're going to have a one world clamp down on our carbon
Air
emissions.
travel.
Yep.
Yeah, air travel's gone. Shut the airports. Yeah, I can see that happening. Wow. That's a long game. It's a long con, but yeah, they can merge the two and they meet in the middle and there'll be no more flying.
Yep. Both sides agree. So I'm like, okay, both sides are probably wrong, which is consistent. I tend to think any bifurcated psyop that has a partisan interpretation is a hoax, and anything that's pushed by emotional appeals, logical fallacies, and I know somebody who knows somebody. Because even if I took him at his word that he knows somebody who worked on a plane,
Mhm.
well, I have a relative as a pilot who says these things don't exist. So whose secondhand account do we listen to, mine or his? And so that's why we have to reject those types of claims.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just endless though. People really dig into their sides and they don't let it go. I'm kind of not I never considered it a media fakery conspiracy, so it's not really where I like to go. But the people that are attracted, at least to my site, tend to bring it up, and they're like a dog with a bone; they won't let it go. They
Now,
just
yeah, yeah, and with regard to media fakery, which is a far more important topic here,
Mhm,
because we're talking about perceiving accurately, and not, and so chemtrailers believe their stuff, but they have their reasons. But I think it's more important to think about how we accept claims. And one thing I find interesting is that a lot of people right now are calling the Trump shooting fake, the ear wound fake, but
mhm.
because they think the fireman died, they are still clinging to uh, the idea that this is like a false flag instead of total hoax. And so I see how people are trapped in their boxes. And so I think one of the fascinating things to see now is how people who are anti-Trump are happy to call it fake because it takes away his martyr status, but they
Mhm.
can't call the whole thing fake because that would implicate the media on their side as well.
Right, yeah. There's not too many advocating for a completely staged event. That's a tough one for anyone outside of this of our group.
Yeah, yeah, especially okay, I'm listening to Joe Rogan talk to Trump, and a lot of the things that we already debunked, like for example, the idea that there were Venezuelan gangs taking over apartments in Aurora, and Hell's Angels were coming from California to get rid of those gangs because they're taking the
Mhm,
jobs from American gangs. I saw this story and I thought this has got to be fake. Turns out the motorcyclists were not Hell's Angels. They were going to a motorcycle rally in Durango, Colorado, not
mhm.
even going to Aurora. So that story was debunked, and the Venezuelan gangs weren't actually taking over these apartments. And yet, in the conversation between Rogan and Trump, Rogan's like, "Yeah, I'm seeing the news today, and you got the Venezuelan gangs taking over Aurora," and Trump's like, "Yeah." So they live in a fictional universe where these things are true. They don't get to the point of debunking these things, and I'm like, "What a mess!"
Yeah, Trump brought that up tonight in his speech, actually. He went on and on about it.
Unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's real or fake at this point. I call this brute force mind hacking, where they
Okay.
just throw everything at you, and a lot of it's going to hit a lot of people. Some won't hit everyone, but enough of it's going to stick, and that's their approach.
Yeah, I suppose that story's gonna go away and just and get subsumed by whatever's next, and there's always something next, especially with this greatest show on earth, this presidential campaign that I guess they have a winning formula where even after the vote is taken or allegedly taken, it will just go on and on and on and be contested, and it doesn't matter what side we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's continuous. It's
Now,
every day.
out of this conversation I've been having on Twitter about the Trump ear wound and somebody dying, I have a new kind of axiom I want to introduce, and it's simply this: if any event has any evidence indicating fakery,
Mhm,
then you must assume zero dead until proven
mhm,
otherwise. So a lot of people are like, well, the fireman died and he faked his ear wound. No, no, no. The fact that there's any indication of fakery means we have to start at zero. And predictive programming is evidence of fakery.
mhm.
We can now consider it to be true. The fact that we were able to predict the head wound and where it would happen on his head and everything else, to me, this is all saying that yes, predictive programming is evidence of an incoming psyop. So that alone says assume zero dead.
Well, yeah, there's a I guess a legal phrase, falsus in unum falsum, falsus in omnibus. So if one thing is false, then everything else is probably false as well, or you have to assume it's all false, or at least needs to be proven even more.
I like that. And I've been having a lot of conversations and debates about the space station, and
Mm,
I have a list of things to show people. Like, hey, these are indications of hoaxery, but they won't agree with me with this starting point. I say I won't show you my evidence until you agree that any special effects on the space station necessarily debunks it as being more than a simulation, and they will not agree to that standard because in other words, they don't want to own it. If I provide evidence of falseness, they'll just ignore that piece of evidence rather than have to deal with what it implies, meaning the whole thing's fake.
yeah, I put a link to falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. I'll put a link to that in the show notes so people can look at that. That's a legal term. in common law anyway?
Yeah,
That a
this is,
witness who falsely testifies about one matter is not credible to testify about any matter. Well, many common law jurisdictions reject categorical application of the rule. The doctrine survives in some American courts. Okay.
well, I think we can apply this to media at large. The fact that media has done a psyop and colluded on all sides, even if it's just one, but we can name dozens, hundreds, that means that they are capable of producing entire simulations, lies, and presenting it as real. So I just call the media a liar. And I never give them the benefit of the doubt. That's why I'm comfortable saying the body count is 0 until proven otherwise. Never start with their numbers.
Now, if you do use Twitter or X, you can click on this replies tab. There's so many different ways to look at Twitter, and you do a lot of replying. So you really engage. Is that worthwhile, do you figure, to engage? And yeah, because the problem with replying is the one thing I've been doing on Twitter in the past, I don't know if it makes any difference. I'll do a reply and a retweet so everyone can see it, because I think a lot of people miss the replies. So you can get lost in the replies and no one knows what you're doing really unless they click this tab.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And if I do start a good thread, because I go into replies to debate people. So if I go there, I share the conversations on Minds. Like today, JD Vance was talking about how London has too many Indians. And then I replied with a picture of him and his Indian wife. And I said, is she going to be deported? Just a simple reply. And for some reason, that's been retweeted and reposted tons of times. It's like 5,000 views, 200 likes. So if your objective is to get monetized, replying is a smart thing to do because you have to have a certain number of impressions to be eligible. And I'm almost there. So I'm kind of trying to also not engagement bait, but I am engaging and I am inciting debate so we can talk about things, because this is my way to directly confront Normieville and Trutherville and Woketown if I choose.
So X, you're trying to get monetized on X? Is that what your strategy is?
Eventually, I'd like to. I think it's probably going to happen eventually at some point. It's just a matter of time. These
What's
live
that?
streams,
What does that mean though? I don't even know what it means to be monetized on X.
I think they give you a certain amount of money per impressions per month. So the more traffic you drive, the more retweets, the more engagement you get. I don't know if
Okay.
it's big, but it could be. It could be in the future. And if we are spearheading a third branch of media, those of us content creators on this side of the screen, then it makes sense at some point that the level of engagement is going to go up, and so I'm kind of planning for it. I think it's also useful that X allows me to mirror my live streams. So there's
Yeah,
quite a lot.
I'm doing it too. Okay, here you go. Here's the here's the JD Vance thing. Yeah, and he's married to an Indian woman. Yeah, it's funny. Very double talking, very two-faced. That's one thing I noticed about Trump, and I put it on Fakotube. Fakotube.com is my video platform for all you IPS guys. And I think I got this off Jake the Asshole's channel, or maybe his channel led me to this one where it shows the double-faced Trump, where he is an expert saying the opposite concept in the same sentence almost half the time, but he speaks out of both sides of his mouth and really is always on both sides of every issue.
Says it like it is.
I'll just play a little bit of
Speaks
this.
the truth.
It's about time we have a man like Trump in here. They ain't afraid to tell it like it is, man.
We like him. He tells it like it is.
He says what he means. I honestly believe he's telling the truth.
So on Hillary Clinton,
She has no natural talent to be president.
She's very talented, and she has a husband that I also like very much.
Hillary Clinton was the worst Secretary of State in the history of the United States.
Hillary Clinton, how did she do as Secretary of State? Probably above and beyond everybody else.
Let's say Hillary is president.
Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I think she really works hard, and I think she does a good job, and I like her.
So
I will build the wall, and
we'll
Mexico
do
is
this
going to pay
one
for
last
it, and they'll
clip.
be happy to pay for it.
I'm not going to pay for that fucking wall.
This guy used a filthy, disgusting word on television, and he should be ashamed of himself, and he should apologize, okay?
Listen, you motherfuckers, we're going to tax you 25%.
I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. We'll beat the shit out of them.
Political bullshit. You're not going to raise that fucking price, you understand?
All right, so there he is. There's a lot of that. I'll put a link to this one because he's so good at covering both sides. That's why he attracts so many people, because he's for both sides all the time.
Yeah, very Machiavellian, where you want to present a blank slate and let people project and let them see what they want to see. And so he's purposely vague and foggy, and it works.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's the best show on earth here. So let's see if anyone else in the chat has anything to contribute or talk about. Les Luther. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing is we've been doing these auto hoax cons, and my objective is let me get anyone who focuses exclusively, more or less, on media fakery and do sort of like a panel. And this is like a monthly thing. So Auto Hoax Con number 3 is going to take place in November. I'm not sure. It'll be the second or third weekend, depending, but I'll let you know. But I think that you would make a welcome addition to what we've been doing.
Oh, thanks. Sure, I'll come on. Sure. I know you were doing it. I just didn't really track it. I can definitely do something at the same time or different time, but this is my main time, 8 o'clock most days, because I do work a slave job. So
okay, well, what we'll do then is we'll take that into account, and if we can get you as a live guest, that would be great. But yeah, just thought I'd bring it up here because there's just so few of us, and I think we're all on the same sheet on most of the important points here. And so I think it'd be great to get more of our audiences together and just see what happens.
yeah, I'm all for it. Sure. Yeah, you're right. There aren't too many people here that talk the way we do in our way of looking at things. So, and yeah, sure, I'll definitely participate in any way I can. And I'm just looking if there's anything else. We come up to about an hour. I usually like to go about an hour. So you have so much content. You've got IPS.monster, as everyone should know. I usually get your stuff via the Odyssey uploads. You upload to Odyssey, so that's usually where I get your show on, mostly on the daily. You go up and down. Sometimes you put 3 or 4 at once. Is that still the best place to get your shows, IPS on Odyssey?
Yes, Odyssey's very reliant and very reliable. I put all my archives there, and of course, I try to do it nightly. I try to, but sometimes I kind of get held back, and it takes me 2 or 3 days to catch up. So you'll get your email bombarded with content, but I'm just about caught up. So IPS.monster, appreciate the plug. That is the hub.
Okay. And do you keep your YouTube streams, or do you delete them? Are they approved by YouTube? Can they stay up?
I tend to delete them if we talk about anything controversial, and I have a backup YouTube account where I premiere them, and then from there it auto exports to BitChute, and then I have a redundant backup Odyssey. So I make use of multiple YouTube accounts because I don't want to compromise my main channel, which happens to be monetized, and we have a lot of members on that channel.
Okay, so people can actually subscribe or join that channel with the subscription model on YouTube?
Yes, and so if I'm on a live YouTube stream, someone will often gift memberships for other people, but members get special access. I can pre-release videos or do members-only content. And so, yes, that is a feature of the main channel, and it's doing pretty well. 1,300 subs.
And that only works if you have more than 1,000 subs, I believe. Is that right?
I think that's when they turn it on. And so this main channel has about 1,300, which is still small. I mean, my first channel was closer to 7,000 before they shut it down. We've had 12,000. We've never quite regained the numbers we've once had, but those people didn't die. They still exist. It's just that our network was broken. So I'm actively seeking to build it back up.
Yeah, it takes a lot to build a channel, and it takes nothing to delete it, which is what they do. So it's and it is easy for people to join these things. You just literally click this join button, and I've done it on other channels as well, and it is super easy. But you're paying, I guess, a decent chunk to Google or Alphabet or whatever they call themselves, 40% or so. So there's that. So people need to take that into account if you really want to support someone directly. I think the best way is just through, at my place, it's, using Stripe, the Stripe payment service, or, donor box, fakeologist.com/donate. That I think I get the most of my, of the, donation as opposed to, say, YouTube, but I guess YouTube is just easier and people are already set up with their Google account.
Yeah, it's practically a de facto monopoly, antitrust, all this stuff would be brought up in a sane world. I'm really trying to transition into a business model based on publications. So I'm kind of working on this tabloid project, which has been delayed, but it's still viable. It's going to launch soon. But I'd like to move from donations to more of a subscriber and reader supported content, which makes it harder for them to censor. But
Yeah.
but for the time being, I will monetize Twitter. I'll monetize YouTube if I can.
Yeah, my motto is just make it open for any way that they can support you. Even Substack has a way, I think. Are you able to get Substack monetization right away, or do you have to wait with them too?
Oh no, Substack is great. Substack is like a backup Patreon. So anybody who's on Patreon, they get archives, live notifications, anything inside, and I mirror all that content at Substack. And it's basically free, but if you pay $5 a month, you get access to additional layers. But yeah, whether you're on Substack, which is ips.monster, or Patreon, it's the same content.
And does Substack take a big chunk?
Not really. And Substack, I think it's reliable, it's not censored, and I do get a lot of traction. People do read it, which is great because I'm trying to get a lot of these ideas out in print. And I think that's a key component here because videos can be deleted, but we want to get into books, we want to get in print. So I use Substack to get a lot of ideas out that I want to print later. So like this last article, fictional universes and how these guardrail minds. Important concept. The idea of the mainstream media working within a closed fictional universe. So that's I've been basically taking Substack and publishing it almost annually. I put it into some kind of a book.
Well, that's great. And any do you see anything for the ISS happening? It's just the same old thing with NASA, or just talking about just the fakery, the way they just fake the scenes. But I don't really think anyone besides a few truthers are paying any attention to the ISS. I don't think the average young person has any idea what's going on.
Yeah, it's out of sight, out of mind. The stranded astronauts are still up there.
Mhm.
Personally, I think it's an Achilles heel. Its special effects are stuck in 2015, and it is actually just part of the bigger story. I mean, when Megalopolis came out, it opens up or has this major scene of the Russian satellite falling to the Earth. And while that movie's in the theaters, as it hits the various film festivals, a Russian satellite in space blows up into 100 pieces, and it necessitates the lockdown of the ISS. They prepared for disaster. And by the way, just the other day, a Boeing satellite, I think it was like nomenclature has like a 33 in it, very obvious, broke apart in the atmosphere. So a Boeing blowing up. This has been a reoccurring theme. So my eyes are on the ISS as possibly some kind of disaster to come. Fly Me to the Moon made multiple references to Boeing and explosions. So there's a good chance that the ISS is going to be center stage again here soon. It's been set up. There's been a lot of leads for it.
Yeah, and the Boeing just settled their labor dispute, and the stock is way down. And I don't know what the plan is for Boeing in the future, whether they're gonna try and blow up the company or not, but or the unions that dominate the company. So that's the business angle to that as well.
Yeah, well, hey, tomorrow is Bill Gates' birthday. It's
Okay.
the death anniversary of Matthew Perry, the day of the first Q drop, and there might be some other things we're missing, but 10/28, very interesting date. I think that Elvis Presley got his polio shot on TV on that date. So anyway, start
Well,
off to
a
yep.
lot to look forward to, and of course, next, what day is election day? Election day is Tuesday, November 5th, so that's another big day as well, 9 days away. So that's definitely gonna be what everyone's gonna be talking about ad nauseum for the rest of the year at least.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mess because sore losers, sore winners, who knows what's going to happen, but it's going to be disputed regardless. And I don't trust the polls. I trust there's a script and it's already written in advance.
All right. Well, it looks like there's 176 people just on the video portion, including 90 of your subscribers on Infinite Plane YouTube. So great turnout, and I really appreciate you coming on. And we'll keep doing this, and you can keep in touch and just communicate with me when you want me to do something with your Auto Hoax Con. I'll be happy to join, and we can just keep crossing over and bringing our audiences together. And if anyone else knows other audiences we can bring into this discussion, that would be good too.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me on. And I look forward to AutoHoaxCon 3 having you there. It'll be fantastic. And yeah, very interesting week ahead. So thanks for having me on right before, and we'll touch base after.
All right. Thank you, Tim Osmond of IPS.monster. I appreciate that. Thanks everyone for joining in. We usually go about an hour. I think that's enough. Tim is on every single day. Make sure you catch all his podcasts, his videos, and I'm a subscriber, and you guys should be too. Make sure you support independent content like ours, and we'll just keep doing it. And thanks everyone for supporting at fakeologist.com/donate. And we will come back tomorrow probably and discuss more. Thanks everyone for turning out, and we will talk to everyone later.